90% of consumers read online reviews before visiting a business. What do people see when they look you up online? We give you the tools you need to take control of your reputation. Send surveys to your customers via text message with Testimonial Collector. Get 5-star reviews on all the major platforms like Google, Yelp, and more. Track what people are saying about your business with Reputation Manager. Respond to comments and turn negative reviews into happy customers. See what your competitors' customers are saying about them with Competition Tracker. Learn great marketing tactics and what it takes to stay on top. A bigger social presence means more connections. Automatically generate and schedule engaging social media posts with Social 365. Build trust, boost sales, and grow your business.
Entrepreneur Life Show. Work toward being significant. Entrepreneur Life Show. Don't you worry, success will follow. Entrepreneur Life Show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It is Thursday. I love Thursdays. I guess I love all days, but I especially love Thursday because it's Entrepreneur Life Show, the podcast. And I'm your host, Rose. For those who are tuning in for the first time, thank you for tuning in and subscribing. And of course, to all my faithful followers and subscribers, even though I can't see you, I always want to say this because my show would not have grown had it not been for you all. We have only been, in fruition for about 2 years. And oh my gosh, we are about maybe 1,000 some away from subscribers, which is awesome on all platforms. And, our downloads have been amazing. So I appreciate you, especially to the publicists that give me the best guests. So, of course, for those who are new, welcome to the Entrepreneur Life Show, where we bring thought-provoking, entertaining conversations and guests to our listeners. These are influential guests, people who you can connect with that are going to help you. You could be having a problem in your life. If you have a business, entertainment, maybe you have a story that you want to tell. We bring the best guests onto the show. Make sure you subscribe to the Entrepreneur Life Show. Just go to the website, entrepreneurlifeshow.com. Scroll to the bottom, and you'll find all the podcast platforms and as well as where we stream live. So let's get the housekeeping out the way, marketing out the box. So if you want more customers and grow your business, visit iwantmorecustomersnow.com. And then, of course, Spin Wax Radio, where they are always looking for new artists worldwide. And if you want worldwide exposure, make sure you check out spinwaxradio.com and download the app on your iOS phone or Android, Spin Wax Radio, where we are also streaming. Yay! Okay. So today's guest, first it's kind of exciting because, what I love about authors is when you get authors on the show or people everybody has a story to tell. But when you get someone, they're so transparent and it's inspiring, and, they're willing to share and be so transparent that I believe anybody will probably be able to, if you don't know someone who's going to connect with this story and with SP Brown, it will probably be you. So then you will be able to check out her book. She's going to share with us her debut book and her whole adventure. So before I bring her on, I'm going to give you just a little bit of who she is before I bring her on to the show. So those who are watching live, you'll be able to see. And for those who are hearing on your podcast platform, jump on over to YouTube or somewhere and connect with us. So here's a little bit about Miss SP Brown.
Hi, I'm SP Brown, new author of Gifts in Brown Paper Packages. Gifts in Brown Paper Packages is a coming-of-age story. It's a story of strength, perseverance, self-awareness, and a coming of age to Kyrie's truth.
Yes, there it is. Woo! Excited.
So buy it today. Thank you.
Is that not amazing? Let me tell you, that it just had me, my heart was like fluttering a little bit. Let me bring her on the show. Welcome to the show. Yay! Woo!
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Rose.
Very excited to have you on the show. And I must say, I mean, it's just reading your biography. It's very emotionally connecting. And I haven't even been able to read the book. I was like, so I actually started going on Amazon. Then I was looking for you, is why I got your YouTube video. So a little stopped it just a little bit. But welcome to the show. I'm so happy for you to be here. I wanted to start off is for those who don't know you, if you just kind of give a little bit about yourself before we get into like the questions and stuff, and why you decided and what this was the time for you to tell your story.
Sure. So, first of all, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. I'm always concerned about technological issues. So happy you can hear me. And thank you again for having me. I'm so happy to be on your show. So a little bit about myself. I am have been a practicing attorney for the last a little over 20 years. And, writing creatively for most of my life through various mediums, first songs and writing stories at night for probably the last 12 years. I would write while my children, after my children went to bed, and write through the night and get up and go to work as a practicing attorney for a big corporation during the day. And about 12 years ago, I started writing fantasy fiction and wrote about 90% of a really amazing fantasy fiction story and ran into a writer's block. And couldn't figure out why until 2016. I realized that Gifts and Brown Paper Packages was a story that was in me that needed to come out. So I actually wrote this book in 10 months at night. Again, working by day, parent in the evening, author, aspiring author at night. And tried to, went through the publishing process from 2017 to 2019, and put it down until COVID hit, and then realized in 2021 that I was going to self-publish because that was going to be the way for me to get this story out there. And here I am.
A question I've always asked people who, when they write, when it's relative to themselves and having to be so transparent, is I've heard that sometimes writing a biography on yourself can sometimes be reliving it, so it can sometimes affect you emotionally because you're reliving it almost again. But then it can be very exciting because you work through it, so it's aspiring. So being that the struggles that you've gone through, which led you to write this story, why would you say now? And how difficult was it? Or was it just very easy because you had already gone through the transitions of what you've had to struggle with through your youth and growing up?
So to be clear, Gifts is a fictional story based on real life experiences. So
Right.
It's not a biography per se, although many of the experiences are experiences that I experienced. So, writing a fictional story gave me the ability to take some creative license. So, that's what I'm going with. But in terms of the struggle, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head, right? I started writing this book not as a book. I actually started writing this story really as a way to work through some difficult stuff. And I'll tell you, very transparently, It came from a therapy session where my therapist at the time, and huge proponent of therapy, let me just say that, my therapist at the time said to me, you know, you come to therapy and you talk about a lot of stuff, but I don't think you're talking about the stuff you really need to talk about. And why don't you write as a way to sort of process? And you know, you've said that you've always enjoyed writing. You've said that, you know, when people you know, hurt you or when you're upset, you tend to write to sort of process that emotion. Why don't you write as a way to sort of start to talk about some of the things? And I started writing the first chapter, what ultimately became the first chapter of this book, at a writing workshop that a girlfriend took me to, where the facilitator said, "What's your day one moment? What is your light bulb moment when you can say that your life, something in your life changed and you transitioned, right, to a different person, or you know, you got to a place where you began to see things differently?" And I got on a plane that evening and wrote what became the first chapter of Gifts in Brown Paper Packages, which is the night that I left my house at 17. And that first chapter is actually the first chapter of what became this book. So, you know, you know, long answer, I guess, to your question. Writing this book was really initially about writing some experiences, and processing and writing things that writing experiences that I had experienced, I also through other people. And ultimately, after, you know, 10 or 12 chapters, I recognized that there was power in this story. And this is a story that I wanted to complete. And ultimately, I realized it was a story that I wanted to publish, because I recognized that there was strength in reading a story of survival.
Right. So, okay, so I want to know where you got the title of the book. How did you come up with it?
So it's a very funny story. Not so funny, but it's interesting. Actually, the same girlfriend, I'll say her name is Dana. You know, we were talking really about life's challenges. And we were kind of talking about the book. And the book initially was entitled Kyrie's Story, because I was very intentional in writing this book, that I set out to write a book from one perspective, right? I didn't really want to develop other characters. I really didn't want to tell anyone else's story. I wanted to tell the story of a young lady who did not have a voice. And in talking to my girlfriend on this day, we were talking about life's challenges, and she brought up this song from the Sound of Music, and we started talking about the fact that you know, God gives us a number of things, and strife appears on our doorstep in various ways. And when we talk about life and perspective, what we need to do is look at things through a different lens, and look at strife that appears, and figure out where's the gift in that strife, right? What do we glean from life's challenges when they arrive not beautifully adorned, right?
That's well said.
How do we identify the gift wrapped in the brown paper package, right? Because you know, the good stuff arrives beautifully adorned, right? With, you know, beautiful satin ribbons and beautifully wrapped. But what about the stuff that arrives that doesn't look so great? Is there value in it? And that's the concept behind Gifts in Brown Paper Packages, that there's value, that there is a gift within the strife. There's a gift in that box that's not so beautifully adorned, that's wrapped in a brown paper package, maybe with some ugly string.
So I think that it must feel, being that it took you a long time to write this type of book, and to be in the number one spot in 3 categories on Amazon. I mean, how did that make you feel? I mean, did it just give you confirmation? For, you know,
You know, I will tell you that the being an Amazon bestseller in the first week, that was great. But I really give a lot of credit to my literary strategist, Ayana Mills. She was amazing, and she really helped me to get the energy of my readers to actually help to make that happen. So that was amazing. But the validation actually comes from the feedback. As I set out, Rose, to write a book where I said my vision was that this book was transcend race, age demographics, cultural demographics. And that was my vision. And I manifested that. However, to actually see it come to fruition, to have folks from all different, areas, to have a, middle-aged, older, middle-aged white man, say to me, this book resonated with me because of X, and then have a 23-year-old, young lady, of color, say, this book resonated with me because, I saw myself in this character, or this particular experience helped me to process something that I've been going through. That's really the validation, more so than the quote unquote Amazon bestseller status. Yeah.
Is there anything that you can share with us from the book that you think would be one of the most inspiring things as to readers that they can tune into, whether it be personal experience that you've had, and or a part of what where you're telling stories of specific characters that would be relative to male or female?
Oh, that's a good question. So I'll talk about an experience, and I don't want to give too much away. I really want people to read the book, but I'll give a quick example about an experience that is exemplified in the book about voice and courage, and it's sort of a life lesson. In one of the chapters, well, first of all, I'll say that music underpins the character's experience in this book, and that is really because music has always been a really profound power for me in my life. And if you read the book, you see that every chapter has a musical reference. Every chapter has a song and artist that's associated with the chapter, because the character really finds strength in music. And I think that that's something that resonates with lots of people, right? There's generally something artistic in everyone's life that they can sort of pull strength from. So that's key for Kyrie, and it's been key for me my entire life. But in one chapter, and I don't remember which chapter, but this book carries this character from age 4 all the way through adulthood, through flashback. So one chapter, Kyrie is in junior high school, and she's being bullied, which is one of the many themes in the book. Peer-to-peer bullying. She's being bullied by another young lady in school, and for weeks, for no reason. And she goes home and complains to her mom about it. And her mother, Pam's response is that she's going to go up to the school and have a conversation. And this girl has said she's going to kick Kyrie's butt the next day.
Right.
So she's better be ready. And Kyrie's father appears behind her and has overheard this conversation and proceeds to tell her, your mother's not going up to the school. You're going to stand up, because basically where we come from, you stand up for yourself. The only way you're going to get in trouble here is if you come home and tell me that you ran. You're going to go back to that school and you're going to tell that girl that you're going to kick her butt. And Kyrie's reaction is fear. Because she's actually been, and she's been raised in a household where, standing up for herself has actually not been quite, that hasn't been the marching orders. In fact, it's been just the opposite. And she goes back to school the next day, more afraid of man, her father, than she is of this young lady. And she actually does follow that advice. And she, I'm not going to tell you what she does because that's in the book. But at the end of this story, what she recognizes is that her voice is powerful, even more powerful than fists. And she had never acknowledged the power of voice. And this book is all about finding your voice as a young woman. But that can be applied to everyone. Many people, men, women, have found themselves in a place in their lives at some point where their voices have been stifled. So this is a story again of triumph throughout, and that is one situation where Kyrie triumphed. And I'm not going to tell you how she did it, but she triumphed over that bully.
So let's talk about overcoming trauma of domestic abuse, miraculously turning physical and emotional survival into the triumph. And why is it very important, as you're saying, to speak your voice? And how do you even know that you are even that you're even going through some type of traumatic domestic issue? Because some of us, as we know, it's just in the family dynamic. And so you may not necessarily recognize it. And just for me, from a personal standpoint, is when finding your voice, you're not always going to be happy with the reaction, because people aren't anticipate you finding your way, finding your voice, and choosing your own path. Why do you think it's so important that people find their way, find their voice?
Well, why is it so important? Because I think that I don't think that we continue to grow unless we are confident in using our voices when we need to. I think growth is only possible when we sort of gain that confidence to speak our truth. So that's the first thing. But I think your initial question is a really good one, where you mentioned, how do we even know when we're dealing with trauma? And you sort of reference the sometimes the family dynamic is that's just what we're accustomed to. And I know culturally, people of color, can say sort of across various cultures that, that our cultural dynamics tend to be, sometimes a little bit different, right? And, I've heard many people say, if you're born to a Black parent, you just know, you know that, this is just the way things go. Like that's not abuse.
Right.
So, I certainly defer to the experts. I'm not a mental health professional. So I'm not, all I can talk about is from my experience. Trauma is about the impact. It's not about the act. It's about how that act impacted you as a person. So, I think when we ask ourselves, have we experienced trauma? We have to ask the next question, how do I feel? Right? How do I feel about what I just went through? Emotional trauma is oftentimes more debilitating and more impactful even than physical trauma. So, I've asked myself the question, because I didn't wind up in the hospital, or because I didn't, because you can't see physically the trauma on my body, does that mean that maybe it didn't happen? And I think that's a human response. And I think I know for me with treatment and which came in the form of talking to professionals, that actually know what trauma looks like and how it shows up. I learned that it's really about impact. How do I feel? How am I now reacting to the world around me after the act? And if the answer to that is I feel badly or I feel impacted, then you likely have experienced some trauma.
Right.
Yeah.
Would
Yeah.
you say
So I think
that your novel, Gifts in Brown Paper Packages, would that you share this with your children, and that it would be a book that could be shared within, the parents should share with their children, and of any age, or maybe in some curriculum and understanding, because as you said, domestic or trauma or abuse happens in so many ways you don't recognize it. And being that you do have a lot in your novel from as a youth, is growing up to be an adult, do you think it's something
Mhm.
that could be shared as a curriculum?
Absolutely. And in fact, it's actually one of the things that I've been working hard to do over the last couple of months. I mean, I've had a number of mental health professionals and educators who read the book say to me that this book is a blueprint for so many different themes that would be helpful in dealing with you know or teaching, uh, uh, in various arenas. I would say, in terms of the age group,
Mhm.
it is some of the content is difficult. There is some profanity because this character deals with domestic abuse in her home. Um, and the dialogue is sometimes oftentimes emotionally abusive, and that's hard to read. So I say, in the context of the age demographic, this is not likely for anyone under the age, I would say 16, 17. So I've been dialoguing with educators, at the high school level, 11th and 12th grade, but most recently have had a number of folks in the academic arena, undergraduate work and graduate level work, particularly schools of social work, say that this book is right for, in terms of this narrative and the various and really broad themes that it deals with. Not ranging from not only domestic violence issues, but I talked about the peer-to-peer bullying. It deals with issues of, gender dynamic within the household, the impact of incarceration on the family unit. It deals with, systemic racism issues. So, I mean, and I could go on. In fact, some of the themes that have been pointed out to me weren't even themes that I recognized when I was writing the book. So definitely, my vision is seeing this book, used as text in many programs, including undergraduate, graduate work, and high school curriculums.
Wow, that's impressive. So I also see that you're a lawyer by profession, and I wanted to ask, why did you take up law? And by any chance, could any of it maybe have been relative to your experiences in life that you chose law as your career choice?
Oh, yes, that's a good question. So absolutely, I realized, fairly early in life that being an advocate was something that I had a penchant for, probably because I didn't feel like I was a great advocate for myself as a young adult.
Mhm.
So, once I sort of created the power within myself to, sort of be autonomous, and I found my voice, being an advocate professionally sort of came very easy, in terms of what profession I wanted to be. And the other thing is that I grew up in an underprivileged household, community, and I was also looking at how can I create financial security for myself. So the funny story is
Right.
that my I went to Hunter College undergrad, and my college English professor, who I am in touch with today because I dug her out of the internet when I started writing, and asked her to help me with some editing, because she actually tried to convince me to get an MFA when I was graduating from Hunter College. And I said to her, I'm going to go to law school because that seems like to me to be the career where I'm going to actually make some money. I don't think writers make that much money. So, and I need to be able to, provide for my family. So that was that's sort of a funny story, because I've sort of come full circle in that I've been practicing law for over 20 years, and employment discrimination work, which is really interesting work. The law is really interesting. So I can't say I didn't enjoy it, but writing is so much more fun and so much more, creative, and frankly gives me the opportunity to inspire and impact others, which is what really feeds my spirit. So here I am.
So I'm going to go on a quote. It says that I realize that my truth is characterized by every aspect of my background, including the terrible, painful memories, as you said. How important is a human always being true to our core and always to tell our truth?
I think it's very important. However, it's a journey that takes many of us, myself included, sometimes a bit of time to get to. First of all, you have to be able to identify what your truth really is, and that's sort of not just a given. I say that we have to not be, totally defined by our experiences, but that we have to acknowledge that our experiences inform who we are. And I think even that's a distinction that, sometimes takes some time to figure out. So answer to your question is, it's very important. I think everyone has to be given grace to, in terms of, how long it takes you to sort of get to that point where you can actually speak that truth. And once you get there, I think it's powerful.
I think so. In my research, and I want to see how you agree with this, is violence against women remain devastating, and of course, and starts alarming young, very early. So, and what shows new in data is that World Health Organization and partners across a lifetime, that 1 in 3 women, around, I think it's 736 million, are subject to physical violence.
Mm-hmm.
This number that has remained largely unchanged, and over the last decade. Why do you think that women are prone to physical violence? And what should they, if they experience, such a number as high as it is, why there are so many don't want to contact agencies, or do you think agencies are not doing enough? Maybe they're still just not understanding the differences of what domestic violence is. As you said, there's physical and then there's mental. Do you agree with those numbers, and that there maybe isn't enough being done?
Well, first of all, I happen to know that number is accurate. I mean, I sit on the board of on a domestic violence agency that services in the area that I currently live in New York. But so that number, that statistic is not alarming to me, in that I've heard it several times. It is alarming in terms of the sheer magnitude of the number. I don't think the issue is that agencies are not doing enough. I think that so many instances go unreported because changing that condition is not an easy thing. And I don't negate, how hard it is for women, many women, to acknowledge that they're even in an abusive relationship. And I don't, it's not something that I judge. I just try and understand. It's one of the reasons that I decided that this book needed to be published, because I recognize that there's so much power in individuals being able to read a story and see themselves in that story and recognize that there's triumph in their survival that can be realized, notwithstanding the triumph. I mean, notwithstanding the domestic violence, there's triumph that can come out of that. But I don't think that it's an easy thing. And again, I'm not a mental health professional. I would really defer to the experts to talk about like what the pathology is around. I think that there's a cycle also to abuse. Right? Many abusive relationships sort of repeat themselves generationally, and if there's not treatment being sought, then it makes it even more difficult to acknowledge the trauma that is being impacted on people day in and day out. So I think there are a lot of pieces there to sort of explain why there's so much, and there's so much that doesn't get reported. But the point is, I think if one person is touched by hearing a survival story from someone else, then I've done my job, at least.
So I know within your book, and you talk about it's best that you would see that you kind of guided it towards 16 and above. And I think any male, female, anyone should be able to relate to it, although the character is a female. Do you think that there's enough books, or have you considered some type of picture book or anything for for less than 16 or 15 and understanding? Or is that not something that right now you feel it's too early on for, that are 7 and 10, that making them aware of it earlier and understanding the differences? I don't know what is a good time to catch it and realize it, or they're just not mentally aware, is why maybe there's not a lot out there, when it gets 5 and 7.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that I have the answer to that question, because frankly, I don't think that I am well poised or have the expertise to speak about these types of issues to such a young, impressionable reader. I will say that one of the other books that I'm looking to publish at some point in the future is deals with a young character who is 13 and who has lived a life of foster care with and has had a number of different really difficult, challenging experiences. It's a fantasy story, so this character has powers, and her powers get stronger as she believes in self. So that's a whole nother sort of confidence building, inspirational story, and for a younger reader. But how do you expose really young children? It sounds like you're talking about like primary age children.
Yeah, right.
To these issues. I think that's a question better poised for a child psychologist. So
are you, because you've been writing a while, are you looking at doing a series? Because really this isn't your first, look.
Right. So this is actually the first book I published, second book that I started writing. So you're right about that. I had not before publishing this book or before writing this book thought about doing a series with this book, although I have had the question posed to me at this point several times. many readers that read this book are very interested in understanding the other stories and hearing about the other stories of the other characters who are, sort of peripheral to Kyrie in this story, but core to the narrative. So I've thought about that. Whether or not I'm going to write that book is that remains to be seen. I will tell you that the fantasy fiction book that I am very excited about is a trilogy. So, so I'm very excited about having the opportunity to delve into that and the world that character comes from, or is visits and saves, and that's all I'll tell you there.
So then, how many characters do you have in Gifts in a Brown Paper?
So Kyrie's the main character. There's Pam, her mother. There is Man, who is the primary protagonist, and he's the conflict builder, right, in the story. And Kyrie's brother, Sire. And there is Shane, Kyrie's ultimate love interest. So
there should be someone.
So those are the main characters, and then there are other characters that are also, I won't go into, but those are the main characters of the story.
So there really should be, each character should have a relationship to just about every reader.
Oh yeah, yes, most certainly. And again, I've had readers, say to me, I had a young man reach out to me and indicate that given his reading of a sort of a sexual trauma that Kyrie experienced in the book, that it really helped him to process a story of abuse that a family member had just shared with him recently. So he really connected with Kyrie in that story. And this was a young man. I really never anticipated that as a possibility. So I agree with you. I think that you don't ever know what nuance is going to resonate with a reader, because everyone has a story. Everyone has a different story, which is why it's so important for us to tell our stories.
Yes. And so let's say, so how did you find all of your characters? Now, I know I've had some people on the show who took their characters from people, because I have one who's a salon owner, and she pulled some of her characters from her clients. And then some, of course, I had someone else, and then it was some, from personal friend. And of course, they didn't name them, obviously, but that's where they were getting some of the characters or some of the storyline. What about for yourself, for the characters that you brought up and how they became in fruition, how you created those characters?
Well, again, this book is based on real life experiences. So many of these characters came from my life.
I'm sure then they know that.
Yeah, I think the people who are referenced by, and not of course by name, but certainly characters, I think they certainly can identify themselves. But what I was very intentional about was not telling any other story other than Kyrie's story. And that was very important to me. This was about this young woman and her ability to process her life's strife and identify the gifts. And that was really important to me. And that, and that's interesting, to be honest with you, as a writer, because I was concerned that literary heads would read this book and say, she didn't do any character development here. This is not a well-written book.
Mm-hmm.
And, I actually did that very intentionally. I was not interested in really doing too much. I mean, you get to know the character's mother a little bit. You certainly get to know man, but not really their stories.
And so it's really just every all the characters are really just based around the main character and how she
Hmm.
interacts with the character. Yeah. Okay. Get that.
That's right. That's right. And she's a very entertaining and endearing young lady. You want to know her.
So okay. So how does being a lawyer? How did it help you, or did it? Your profession as being a lawyer help you to finish the book and write the book? I mean, was it any struggle because of course, you're handling being a lawyer and then taking a story, and some of the stories, from experiences that you had personal, was it helpful?
Um, well, I would say that being a lawyer, the skill set that you develop as a lawyer is helpful in so many different arenas. I mean, particularly in writing, because I wrote for my living my entire life. I just didn't really write creatively. Um, so that was helpful. I can't say that I really utilized any aspects from my life as a lawyer in this story,
Mm-hmm.
uh, other than sort of the logical way that I very methodically, uh, you know, told this story in a, it's told in a chronological way through flashbacks, and that's done very logically. So clearly,
Mm-hmm.
my skill set as a lawyer, I think, informed that. But not no real sort of anecdotal aspects of my lawyerism, uh, were infused into this book. I was actually trying to get away from the lawyering as I was writing this book.
So what kind of, you would say, inspires you aside from in writing your book, and start obviously from now you have from some personal experiences that you've encountered, now moving on to other books that you're writing, what actually inspires you to trigger you to write those books? Just things surround you, maybe people.
I'm inspired by the the promise of young people, and I'm inspired by the ability to inspire others, and that is really, I have felt for a long time that that was my calling. It's certainly what feeds my spirit, and I started writing uh, in a way that ultimately would produce a work product that could be inspiring to others. I mean, that's why I started writing the first book, which was not a coming of age story. It was a fantasy fiction story, but it dealt with, or it was derived from, my feelings of insecurity as a young person. My feelings of feeling ugly as a young Black girl growing up in Harlem. You know, my feelings of feeling like, I was too dark, or I was too skinny, or I was, my hair wasn't quite the way it wasn't pretty enough. I say that with quotations.
Yeah.
And when I started to write the fantasy fiction book, I was writing fantasy fiction because that was the genre that I had most enjoyed as a young person, because it
Right.
allowed me escapism, right? It allowed me to enter worlds and that did not look like my own, that were mystical and where people had powers, and I always wanted powers as a young person. But then I started writing about sort of the challenges that I felt as a young Black girl, and my character is a character that is not happy with the way she looks, even though people look at her and think that she's beautiful. And And
Yeah. Well.
so the inspiration in my writing is really it's really drawn from my desire to positively impact other people and make others feel better about who they are and what they have, because it's what I've always wanted. It
So.
took me a long time to get to a point in my life where I could look in the mirror and say, "Girl, you're gorgeous."
Oh, I get. Let me tell you, I get that. Um, and you keyed in on, and I think this can be, a connection with any person of any, race, but the and when you define on, just for example, saying, I was watching a live for someone, and it was a young lady, because she didn't put her hair in braids, or because she did not put a relaxer or whatever on her hair, and people were saying, why don't you do that, you look prettier, or you'd be prettier. And I really,
Hmm.
I just kept watching it over and over again. I was like, wow. Because when I ended up getting locks, and because I'm getting older, and I'm like, I can't be doing my hair, it takes too long. So you're either going to get older, you're going to cut it off, or you're going to do something.
Hmm.
It's just too much. But it really was a defining moment for me when people were saying, and I'm biracial, so I have curly hair, why would you do that to your hair, you were so pretty. And I thought,
Hmm.
people kept telling me I'd go on this lock journey, just hang in there, just hang in there. And it was like, I got it. It was this self-discovery of, so we were saying my hair made me pretty. I
Right,
started kind
right,
of looking at
right.
myself. And then I really started looking at myself. So I get what you're saying. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
went through years of, like, on and off of therapy and counseling. And
Hmm.
but I didn't start seeing the superficial part of myself. I saw the emotional
It's
part of
yeah.
myself. Didn't see the
It's
superficial part of, like, I'm dressing for other people, and I'm,
for other people. Yeah, it's
yeah,
crazy how prevalent, how profound the societal impact is on our views of ourselves, right? And I often think about myself, like, I grew up with a mother who was very sort of outwardly confident about her appearance. I mean, my mother, in the context of her hair, I was a young girl. She cut her hair off and wore a Caesar, and she was very confident with that. And then she started growing locks and grew locks down her back for, like, 20 years. And here I am, and always told me that I was beautiful.
yeah,
Uh, but here I am, growing up with sort of the societal,
yeah.
view of image of beauty, and really allowed myself to believe that I wasn't beautiful. I was too brown. My hair wasn't curly enough, right? Or was my curls were too tight, and and it didn't grow down. And and much of this are the experiences that Kyrie deals with, in the book. And I've had so many Black women say to me, and women of all different hues, right? Because we know the diaspora is so diverse, right, and so vast. Say to me, I so resonated with Kyrie sitting on that bus, tugging on her cornrows, because they didn't hang down like the little Black girl that was sitting a couple of rows ahead of her, who had two cornrows, but they were hanging down her back. Um, it's so interesting how we internalize these images of beauty. So this is dealt with in my fantasy book as well, which I'm talking about too much because the book is not even completely finished. So
So before we go, I want to make sure we're running into time. But for all
okay.
those aspiring writers out there, and that might be listening, because I agree, we all have, like, a story somewhere, and they may not know when it's their time, or if they want to actually share it. And it doesn't have to be an actual biography, like you said. You kind of use your experiences for this book. What would you say? What advice would you give? And I also want to make sure that you guys, I did show the video, but you guys make sure that you really check it out. It's on Amazon. But what would you share with those?
I think the most important advice that I could give is, at the very least, to just start writing. You know, I think, I'll mention my literary consultant said this to me, and I really credit her for the ability to, push me to publish within a short period of time, because even though the book was finished for a couple of years, I was a little fearful.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, she gave us, I don't know if it's a real statistic, but she said it's like 90-something% of people have a story in them, but there's only like less than 10%, and I'm getting these numbers wrong, but you get the gist. There's a very small percentage of folks that actually feel that they have the intellect or the ability or the time to actually put that story down on paper. I would just say, regardless of how confident you feel about your writing abilities or how valuable you think your story might be or a story might be, just write. That's the best advice that I could give. Don't worry about what the work product is going to look like or where it's going to go. Just start writing. Write your story.
Well, I sincerely thank you for being a guest on my show. I want to make sure everybody finds you, even though those who are listening on the podcast, you can jump in and watch the full live interview on entrepreneurlifeshow.com and just find your favorite social platform, and you'll be able to connect with Miss SP Brown. But before we go, she's going to tell you where you can find her.
Yes, well, you can find me on Instagram at s.p.brownwrites, and also on Facebook at spbrownwrites, no periods on Facebook. And you can also go to my website at spbrownwrites.com. So it's all SP Brown Writes.
Thank you so much again for being such a wonderful, wonderful guest on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
And for everybody, we will see you next Thursday for a wonderful, wonderful guest. Go to the webpage, entrepreneurlifeshow.com. For those who are listening on the podcast, you can watch the full interview again. And for those who are coming back, just find your favorite streaming platform and follow us, and you will see us. And until next time, bye, everybody.
Bye.
Entrepreneur.